Good afternoon. I'm so grateful to be here today because I finally have the courage and the opportunity to get up and share a personal side of me that very few people know about. It's a story of personal successes and failures, and there is a whole lot of drama in between. But before I begin, I want to ask you a question. Has your personal and professional life turned out exactly as you planned? If so, raise your hand. I started asking myself this question when I was preparing for this speech. Growing up, I always had a vision for how my life would be when I was older. I'd have a great career working in a field that I loved. I'd be successful, financially comfortable. I'd own a home. I'd give back to my community. I'd be healthy and happy. And right now, I actually can raise my hand because my life does have those things. I have a great career working in a field that I love. I feel successful. I give back to my community. I have a sense of purpose. I'm healthy, and best of all, I'm happy. However, the journey to get to where I am today isn't exactly as I had planned. Certainly not if you had asked me 11 years ago. It's taken me from bad to better to best. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. The building blocks and stumbling blocks that I've encountered over the past decade for finding happiness in my life. But what's so remarkable about my experience? To answer that question, I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, starting almost 11 years ago. Does anyone remember where they were on June 8th, 2007? Most of you probably don't, but I remember where I was. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was on day one of an involuntary 3-day stay at a mental hospital in Riverside, California. The day before, I had tried to take my own life. In order to explain how I arrived there, I'm going to back up another 2 years, just a year after I had graduated from college in Waltham, Massachusetts. I was 23 years old, and I moved to Los Angeles on July 27th, 2005. Again, I was 23 years old, and the idea of living 3,000 miles away from home seemed pretty exotic. Everything was a new experience, and from a girl who had grown up in a small town in Maine, the palm trees, celebrity sightings, and Pacific Ocean breezes were a dream come true. My California dream crumbled after I'd been living in the Brentwood suburb of LA for about 8 months, when I finally decided to get the lump in my neck checked out that had steadily been growing over the past few months. I had carelessly referred to it as my goiter, and I didn't really think much of it. The thought of it being anything serious never really crossed my mind since I had always been healthy. That is, until I was at UCLA Medical Center having a fine needle biopsy performed, and then receiving the call while I was sitting in my cubicle at work that the diagnosis was papillary thyroid carcinoma, thyroid cancer. The thyroid is a small butterfly-shaped gland located right here that produces and stores hormones that affect the function of virtually every organ in our bodies. Who knew? I certainly didn't, but I was about to find out when I had a complete thyroidectomy and was placed on replacement hormones, which I'd have to take for the rest of my life. Dealing with the first health crisis of my life while living so far from home was a scary experience, to say the least. But with the support of my friends and my family back home, I recovered and had tried to move on post-cancer. I felt like I needed to change, so I started a new job at a startup company in Malibu, whose offices overlook the ocean and the Pacific Coast Highway. Pretty cool, right? Except eventually it wasn't. Most of their funding had run dry, and most of what I did was field calls from their creditors. They had stopped paying their bills, and eventually they stopped paying me. So there I was in beautiful and expensive Malibu, unable to pay my bills, completely broke, but too stubborn and ashamed to ask for help. My breaking point finally came on June 7th, 2007, when I came home to the apartment that I had been sharing with my boyfriend at the time, the person that I had moved to LA with and for, and found out that he had been unfaithful to me. I had had enough. Everything that had happened over the past year finally caught up with me. And in a moment of depression and despair, I took whatever pills I could find in my medicine cabinet and waited to see what would happen. A friend found me shortly after, and I was rushed to the ER where I woke up and had my stomach pumped. And then I was taken the following day to a mandatory 3-day stay at a mental hospital. I knew I didn't belong there, and it was the longest 72 hours of my life being locked in there. From there, it was just one setback after another, like the city I loved was rejecting me. My car was repossessed, so I drove around in a rented car. I was mugged at gunpoint outside my apartment and had my purse, cell phone, and the last of the cash to my name stolen. My family and maid begged me to move back, but I was still too stubborn to give in. My wake-up call finally came in September of 2008 when my mother called to tell me that my sister was in labor with her first child, 8 weeks early. On April 22nd, 2008, I finally moved back home to Maine. And on April 24th, 2008, my niece Abigail was born, and I'm grateful to this day that I was there to witness it. So at this point, you're probably wondering why someone who would try to take her own life has the credibility to tell you how to build happiness. I'm standing in front of you more than a decade after this all happened, telling this story for the very first time, only because I've come back from the very lowest point I think I could ever reach. And I'm hoping that each person in this audience can use my experience to help overcome the challenges that you may be facing and build happiness in your lives, as I've been able to do. I found SMPS by chance in September of 2008. I was living with my parents back in home, licking my wounds from my failures out west and desperately looking for a job in the Boston area. Through SMPS Boston, I found a job at an architectural firm in the North End as a marketing coordinator. I had always loved the built environment, and it seemed like the perfect fit. Little did I know at the time the impact that SMPS would have on my future. I worked at this architectural firm for a little under 2 years when circumstances brought me to Connecticut. I was engaged to someone that I had known in college and reconnected with right when I made the move to Boston. His job moved him to Connecticut, so I gladly uprooted my life and made the move along with him. Through SMPS again, this time SMPS Connecticut, I found my job at BL Companies, a multidiscipline design firm where I started as a marketing coordinator in May of 2010. I was encouraged immediately by my boss at the time, Pat Bellato, to pursue a higher level involvement in SMPS Connecticut. So I joined the communications committee and started helping out with the newsletter and program announcements. I had been working at BL Companies and living in Connecticut for a little over a year when my life came crashing down again. My fiance pulled the rug out from underneath me and decided that he didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. I was shocked and heartbroken. I was living in Connecticut because of him, away from my friends and family, and I had no idea where to go. While I hung in limbo, I moved into a tiny basement apartment in the quiet town of Durham. It seemed inevitable that I'd once again move back home to Maine, since I had no ties to Connecticut other than my job at BL. And then in August of 2011, Hurricane Irene hit. My apartment lost power without a prediction for when it would be restored. I was so lonely, and again, I had no idea where to go. And then something remarkable happened. The president and CEO of BL Companies, Carolyn Stanworth, reached out to me and insisted that I come stay at her home in Guilford. She had been aware of my situation and wanted to help. Now, this is someone who had given me some of her own furniture to help furnish my apartment, and she had lined up fellow employees to help me move. She is the leader of a 250-person, $50 million company, and somehow she cared enough to help me. And she's done this for other employees as well. These are gestures that I'll always remember, not only out of their generosity, but because it was these gestures that helped me to commit to staying in Connecticut. I was working for a company that cared, and somehow I knew that with this, everything else would work itself out if I stayed. I've now been at BL Companies for 8 years, and this company has continued to show that it cares. I've been exposed to countless leadership and development opportunities thanks to being surrounded with the right people who have taken chances on me. And for the past 8 years, I've served in some sort of leadership role for SMPS Connecticut. I have volunteered my time, but I've gotten so much more in return. My role in the communications committee eventually evolved to being chairperson, and then in 2012, I was voted on the board of directors. In September of 2015, I became president of the Connecticut chapter. Me. The people that are members of this organization, many of you that I'm standing in front of today, have given me the support that I've needed to somehow navigate through these roles. My career path at BL and my role in SMPS have been completely intertwined. My advancement at BL has directly correlated to my involvement in SMPS. I know for certain that I wouldn't be in the leadership role at BL that I am without my involvement in SMPS. This organization is truly unique. It encourages collaboration, engagement, and is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about working in this industry. Through a connection at BL, I moved to the town of Glastonbury 5 years ago. I had finally found my home. I had lived in 17 different places over the span of 12 years. Some of these moves were made by choice, others not. But when I found this town, I knew that this is where I wanted to live. This is where I belong. I now own a home here, something that I didn't think would ever be possible. If BL hadn't become my family, and if SMPS hadn't become my community, I wouldn't be standing in front of you today, a marketing manager and principal at BL, a past SMPS Connecticut president, and someone with the confidence to tell you my story, scary as that may be. 11 years ago, I was lost and hopeless. And while I'm not sure what the future holds for me, I can confidently say that as long as I have the right people, the right place, and continue to follow my passion, I'll continue to thrive. My hope is that I can pay it forward as this industry has done for me. I've gone from bad to better to best, and I'm so excited for what's beyond. I recommend that you find what building blocks are important to you, seek them out, and use them to build your life for what you want it to be. And remember that although there might be stumbles along the way, they can't crumble the vision of happiness that you have for your life. And the final message that I'd like to leave you with is to try to be that organization that SMPS is to me. Lend a hand, be that community, reach out when someone needs help, because you never know whose life you're going to impact or even save. Thank you.